Nigel Farage is 12-1, fourth favourite, to be the next Tory leader. Ahead of him in the bookie list, Robert Jenrick is favourite, followed by James Cleverly, and want to have a guess who's third? Yes, Boris Johnson. A new poll of voters by More in Common this week found Johnson is the only leader under which the Tories polled higher than Nigel Farage's reform. So I think the obvious last question to you both today, Anushka, you first, is it inevitable that Boris Johnson will return to frontline politics and lead the Tory party? I would say not inevitable, but highly likely. What would you say?
I think in many ways Boris Johnson is the only one you can see who really has that personality to take on Farage. One former Tory MP who lost their seat in last year's election just sent me a message. I think at this stage only a dramatic Boris return might get us anywhere. Only he has the force of personality to take on Farage. Although it is worth just saying that on some of the big policy issues that we're talking about, immigration and net zero, Boris Johnson is quite liberal on immigration and, very pro-environmental policies. So whether he's in the right, political policy place, I don't know. But certainly there is a sense that he has this great personality. But, he also has a lot of people who don't trust him and don't like him and think that he lied.
It feels to me that Tory MPs aren't desperate enough yet, but give it another year of polling at 17% and they might well be. Yeah. Robert, final word to you.
Yeah, look, I was talking to somebody very, very, very close to Boris Johnson, and, we were talking about who might succeed Kemi Badenoch as and when the time comes, and this person used that resonant nickname. This person said, well, it's time for Big Dog to come back. And to address Anushka's point, the great thing about, or some would say the terrible thing about Boris Johnson is he has a long history of saying, I've got these great principles, but, if you don't like this set of principles, I've got another one in my back pocket. So, the idea that it matters right now, if climate change, being anti-climate, climate change measures is the thing of the moment, many people would hope not. I don't think you have to assume that Boris Johnson would be wedded to his net zero approach, the one that he had when he was in power. I think it goes, but I do think it sort of goes to the heart, this question of whether Johnson should come back, will come back, to something we did talk about earlier, which is if the Tory party is not to be destroyed in the coming 2 or 3 years, and that is a really significant risk for the Tory party, the question it has to ask itself is, do we have to get back to being a party of economic and policy credibility? Because that has been its whole history. Its whole history has been, we are the safe pair of hands. Now, Liz Truss, many would say, totally blew that up with the mini budget. So the question is, do they now have to painfully and painstakingly rebuild, essentially being credible? And I have to say, right now, I don't see any evidence that Kemi Badenoch is doing that with the kind of things she says publicly, although she is allegedly working on long-term policies that are yet to be announced that are all about making them look credible. Again, you would argue that if Boris Johnson comes back, that is much more about flamboyance and performance and much less about essentially a robust approach and a credible approach to how you manage the economy. So Boris Johnson may be the answer to a short-term problem, but actually still be part of the long-term decline of the Tory party. This is the big question for them.